In 1998, 22 students from Riverside High's outdoor education program packed their gear for a 3-day wilderness camp at Whispering Pines and never came home. Their tents were found perfectly intact, sleeping bags still warm, but the campers had vanished without a trace. But 25 years later, when park rangers survey the old campground for redevelopment, they discover something that defies explanation: an underground bunker filled with 22 camp journals, each one containing entries dated years after the disappearance. And the final entry in every journal says the same thing: Day 3847. Still waiting for rescue. They promised someone would remember. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no camper stays forgotten. The October fog rolled through Whispering Pines National Forest like smoke from a campfire that never died. It clung to the Douglas firs, wound between the trails where generations of campers had walked, and muffled the sound of Ranger Kate Morrison's boots on the pine needle carpet. She'd been walking these woods for 15 years, but today they felt different, heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. It was just past 8 a.m. when the call came through on her radio. "Kate, this is dispatch. We've got a situation at the old Riverside campground. Survey team found something underground. You're going to want to see this." Kate stopped mid-stride on the familiar trail. The Riverside campground had been closed since 1998, after the incident. 22 kids, gone without explanation. She'd only been a seasonal ranger then, fresh out of college, but she remembered the search. 3 weeks of combing every inch of forest, every cave, every ravine. They found nothing except 22 perfectly pitched tents arranged in a neat circle around a cold fire pit. "What kind of something?" Kate asked into her radio. "Underground structure. Looks like it was built from the inside. And Kate, there are journals. Fresh ones." Kate felt her stomach drop. She'd been one of the searchers 25 years ago. She'd crawled through those empty tents, seen the half-eaten s'mores still sitting on paper plates, the playing cards scattered mid-game. She'd never forgotten the eerie perfection of the abandoned camp, as if the students had simply evaporated. "I'm 20 minutes out," she said. The drive deeper into the forest was quiet and slow. Kate passed the old ranger station where she'd first learned about the missing students from her supervisor, Jim Bradley. He'd retired years ago, never the same after the case went cold. She passed the memorial stone erected by the families in 2003, 22 names carved in granite beneath the words "lost but not forgotten." She remembered every name. Sarah Chen, the group leader who'd organized the trip. Marcus Rivera, the quiet kid who loved photography. Emma Walsh, who'd been excited about her first camping trip. Tommy Davidson, the class clown who'd promised to make everyone laugh around the campfire. Kate had been supposed to be their guide that weekend, but she'd called in sick with the flu. Instead, they'd gone with Dave Parker, a substitute counselor who'd disappeared with them. For 25 years, she'd carried that guilt like a stone in her chest. When she arrived at the old campground, the survey team had already cordoned off the area. The site looked exactly as she remembered, a circular clearing surrounded by towering pines, with stone fire circle in the center. But now there was something else, a gaping hole in the ground where the survey equipment had broken through. "Ma'am," the lead surveyor greeted her, removing his hard hat. "We were doing ground-penetrating radar for the new facilities when we detected this cavity. Thought it might be a sinkhole, but when we broke through..." He shook his head. "You need to see this." Kate nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They'd cleared a safe entrance to what appeared to be an underground chamber. A musty earth smell rose from the opening, mixed with something else, the faint scent of old paper and extinguished candles. She climbed down the temporary ladder they'd rigged. The space was larger than she'd expected, maybe 30 by 40 feet, with concrete walls and a curved ceiling. The air was stale, but breathable. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the room. And there, arranged on wooden shelves that lined every wall, were the journals. 22 composition books, the kind students used for school assignments, each one labelled with a name she recognised from the memorial stone. Kate approached the nearest shelf with trembling hands and picked up the journal marked Sarah Chen, group leader. She opened it to the first page. Day 1, October 15th, 1998. This isn't what we expected. The counsellor said we needed to go underground for safety, but something doesn't feel right. Emma is scared. Marcus keeps asking when we can go home. I told them it would just be for a little while. Kate flipped ahead several pages. Day 47, December 1st, 1998. Mr. Parker says our families think we're dead. He says it's better this way, that the world above isn't safe anymore. I don't believe him, but the others are starting to. Tommy hasn't told a joke in weeks. Her hands shaking, Kate jumped to the middle of the journal. Day 892, March 17th, 2001. Found another exit today, but it's sealed from the outside. Scratched our names into the wall beside it. If anyone ever finds this place, they'll know we tried to get out. We tried so hard. The final entry was dated just 6 months ago. Day 9017, April 3rd, 2023. Sarah died last night. I'm the only one left now. 25 years in this place. I was 17 when we came down here. I'm 42 now, and I don't think I remember what the sun looks like anymore. If someone finds this, know that we never stopped hoping. We never stopped believing someone would come. My name is Emma Walsh, and I was supposed to graduate in 1999. Kate dropped the journal, her legs giving out. She sat heavily on the concrete floor, staring at the shelves of books around her. 22 lives, documented day by day, year by year, in meticulous handwriting that grew more desperate with each entry. She forced herself to stand and examine the room more carefully. In one corner, she found something that made her blood run cold. A calendar scratched into the concrete wall, with careful X marks counting off each day since October 15th, 1998. The marks continued right up to 6 months ago. Against the far wall stood 22 camp cots, neatly made with faded sleeping bags. Personal belongings sat on wooden crates beside each bed, a worn stuffed animal, a tarnished class ring, family photos yellowed with age. And in the centre of the room, carved deep into the concrete floor in letters 2 feet high, "Help us." Kate climbed back up to the surface, her mind reeling. The survey team was waiting anxiously. "Call the FBI," she said, her voice hoarse, "and get me every file we have on the 1998 disappearances. Everything." The Millbrook County Records building hadn't changed much in 25 years. The same fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The same musty smell of old paper and forgotten files filled the air. Kate sat at a metal table, surrounded by boxes of evidence from the original investigation. She'd been reading for 3 hours, and the picture that emerged was troubling. Dave Parker, the substitute counselor, had no teaching background. He'd been hired just 2 weeks before the camping trip, with fabricated references that no one had bothered to verify thoroughly. His background check showed a clean record, but Kate noticed something odd. There was no history of him anywhere before 1997. The bus driver who'd taken the group to the forest, Craig, also disappeared that weekend. His abandoned bus was found at the trailhead, keys still in the ignition, but he was never seen again. And then there were the families. Kate read through 22 missing person reports, each one filled with desperate pleas from parents who'd lost their children. But there was a pattern she'd never noticed before. Over the years, several families had moved away from Millbrook, relocated with no forwarding address, as if they couldn't bear to stay in a place that held so many memories. All except one family. Emma Walsh's parents had never left. Her mother, Margaret, still lived in the same house on Maple Street. Her father had died 5 years ago, but Margaret had maintained their daughter's bedroom exactly as it was, waiting for her to come home. Kate closed the files and reached for her phone. Margaret Walsh answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Walsh? This is Ranger Morrison from Whispering Pines. We met during the search in 1998. I wonder if I could come speak with you about Emma." There was a long pause. "Did you find something?" Kate's throat tightened. "I think I did." Margaret Walsh's house was a shrine to a 17-year-old girl who'd been gone for 25 years. Photos of Emma covered every surface. School pictures, family vacations, the last photo taken before the camping trip, showing Emma grinning beside her packed backpack. Margaret was in her 70s now, white-haired and fragile, but her eyes were sharp as she served Kate tea in the living room that time had forgotten. I always knew she was alive, Margaret said quietly. A mother knows these things. People said I was in denial, but I felt her out there somewhere. Kate set down her teacup carefully. Mrs. Walsh, I need to ask you about the letters. Margaret's hand froze halfway to her mouth. What letters? We found evidence that suggests the children might have tried to communicate over the years. If Emma sent anything. Margaret stood abruptly and walked to an old secretary desk in the corner. She returned with a shoebox, worn at the edges from handling. These started coming about 3 years after she disappeared, Margaret said, lifting the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to Mom and Dad, in handwriting that looked like Emma's, but somehow different, older, more careful. Kate picked up the first one, postmarked 2001, Dear Mom and Dad, I can't tell you where I am, but I'm safe. Please don't look for me. It's better this way. I think about home every day. I think about your apple pie and Dad's terrible jokes. I hope you understand that I had to go. Love, Emma. The letters continued for years, each one brief, each one postmarked from different cities across the country. But Kate noticed something odd about the postmarks. They were all from towns within a 200-mile radius of Millbrook. Did you ever try to trace these? Kate asked. Margaret nodded. The police said they looked into it, but the handwriting matched and there was no evidence of forgery. They said Emma had probably run away and was trying to protect us by staying hidden. Kate studied the letters more carefully. The handwriting was definitely similar to Emma's, but there were subtle differences. Some letters were formed slightly differently, as if someone was trying to copy a style rather than write naturally. Mrs. Walsh, Kate said gently, I need to show you something we found today. She pulled out a photocopy of the final journal entry, the one signed by Emma Walsh. Margaret read it slowly, her face growing pale. This is Emma's writing, she whispered, but not these letters. Someone else wrote these letters. Kate felt the pieces clicking into place. Someone who wanted you to stop looking for her. That evening, Kate returned to the underground chamber. The FBI had secured the scene, but as the discovering officer, she'd been granted access to continue her preliminary investigation. She descended into the bunker alone, armed with a better flashlight and a growing sense of dread. She approached Emma's journal again and began reading from the beginning. The early entries painted a picture of confusion and fear, as 22 teenagers found themselves trapped underground by adults they'd trusted. Dave Parker and Craig Willis were mentioned frequently in the first year, but around day 400, their names stopped appearing. Day 398. November 15th, 1999. Something happened to Mr. Parker and Mr. Willis last night. We heard shouting from the upper tunnels, then silence. When we called out, a different voice answered. A woman. She says her name is Dr. Monroe, and that she's here to take care of us now. Kate flipped ahead, day 573, May 7th, 2000. Dr. Monroe says we're part of something important. She calls it a study of human adaptation. She says the world thinks we're dead, and it needs to stay that way. Marcus tried to argue with her today. They took him to another room. He came back different, quieter. The entries became more sporadic as the years passed, documenting deaths from illness, accidents, and what appeared to be punishment for rebellion attempts. The handwriting in later entries became shakier, more desperate. Kate noticed something else, references to letters being written, but not by the students themselves. Day 2847, October 3rd, 2006. They made me tell them about home again, about Mom's apple pie, Dad's jokes, the way our kitchen smelled on Sunday mornings. Dr. Monroe wrote it all down. She says it's important that my family believes I chose to leave. Kate sat back, horrified. Someone had been using the students' memories of home to forge letters, keeping their families from searching too hard, while they conducted some kind of twisted experiment underground. She grabbed Marcus Rivera's journal and found similar entries about being questioned about his family. Tommy Davidson's journal mentioned being forced to reveal his childhood nicknames and family traditions. Every student had been systematically mined for personal information that could be used to craft convincing correspondence. But who was Dr. Monroe? And was she still out there? Kate climbed out of the bunker and called the FBI field office. This is Ranger Morrison. I need you to run a search for anyone named Dr. Monroe associated with psychological research, particularly anything involving isolation studies or social experiments. The response came back within an hour. Dr. Rebecca Monroe, former researcher at the Institute for Behavioral Sciences, dismissed in 1997 for unethical experimentation proposals. Last known address, a rural property 40 miles north of Whispering Pines. Kate stared at the report. 40 miles north would put Dr. Monroe's property in the same general area where several of the fake letters had been postmarked over the years. "Send me that address," Kate said. "I'm going to pay Dr. Monroe a visit." The property was more isolated than Kate had expected. 20 acres of dense forest surrounding a large cabin that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. The windows were dark, the porch sagged, and weeds grew up through the gravel driveway. Kate parked at the road and walked up the long driveway, hand resting on her sidearm. As she approached the cabin, she noticed something that made her stop cold. A mailbox at the end of the drive, and scattered around its base, dozens of unopened letters. She knelt and picked one up. The return address was Margaret Walsh. Emma's mother had been writing to this address for years. Kate knocked on the cabin door. No response. She tried the handle. Locked. She walked around to the back of the cabin and found a basement entrance with a heavy steel door. It was slightly ajar. She descended into the basement and immediately knew she'd found the truth. The walls were covered with photographs of the missing students, taken over years in the underground bunker. Research notes were scattered across tables, documenting psychological experiments, behavioral modifications, and something called Project Isolation. In the center of the room sat a desk covered with letters in various stages of completion. Kate picked up one addressed to Marcus Rivera's parents. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know it's been a long time since I wrote. I'm doing well in California now. I have a good job and I'm happy. Please don't try to find me. It's better this way." The handwriting was a careful forgery of Marcus's style, but Kate knew from the journals that Marcus had died in the bunker 15 years ago. She heard footsteps above her and froze. Someone was in the cabin. Kate drew her weapon and called out, "This is Park Service law enforcement. Come down here with your hands visible." "I was wondering when someone would finally connect the dots," came a woman's voice from the top of the stairs. 25 years is a long time to keep a secret. An elderly woman descended the stairs slowly, hands raised. She was thin, grey-haired, probably in her 70s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Rebecca Monroe, I presume," Kate said, keeping her weapon trained on the woman. "Former doctor," Monroe said calmly. "They stripped my license when they discovered my research proposals, small minds afraid of what science might accomplish. What did you do to those kids?" Monroe smiled coldly. "I gave them purpose. They contributed to the most comprehensive study of human adaptation and psychological resilience ever conducted. Their sacrifice advanced our understanding of—" "Their sacrifice," Kate's voice rose. "They were children. You kidnapped them and kept them underground for decades." "They adapted beautifully," Monroe continued, as if Kate hadn't spoken. "Some better than others, of course. The strong ones lasted nearly 20 years. Emma was particularly resilient. She maintained her sanity longer than any of the others." Kate felt sick. "Where are their bodies?" Monroe gestured toward a door at the back of the basement. "Preserved for science, naturally. Every death was documented, catalogued, studied. Their contribution to human knowledge was—" "Stop talking," Kate said. "You're under arrest." As she cuffed Dr. Monroe, Kate noticed one more thing on the desk, a half-finished letter addressed to Kate Morrison herself. "Dear Ranger Morrison, I know you've been wondering about us all these years. I want you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. If you're reading this, it means you found the truth. Please tell our families we never stopped thinking about them." Kate stared at the letter. Even in death, Monroe had been planning to manipulate her grief and guilt over the missing students. 3 weeks later, Kate stood in the Millbrook Cemetery as 22 small caskets were lowered into the ground. The entire town had come to say goodbye to the students they'd mourned for 25 years, but never been able to bury. Margaret Walsh leaned heavily on Kate's arm as they watched Emma's casket disappear into the earth. "At least now I know," she whispered. "At least now she can rest." The FBI had found the remains of all 22 students preserved in Monroe's basement laboratory, along with detailed records of her experiments. The case had made national headlines. Underground horror, missing students found after 25 years. Dr. Monroe had been charged with 22 counts of kidnapping and murder. During interrogation, she'd shown no remorse, only frustration that her research had been interrupted before completion. Kate had read every one of the students' journals, chronicling their final years in careful, heartbreaking detail. Sarah Chen had been the last group leader, trying to keep morale up even as their numbers dwindled. Marcus Rivera had drawn pictures of home on the concrete walls until the day he died. Tommy Davidson had told jokes until his final breath, trying to make the others smile in the darkness. And Emma Walsh had written faithfully every day for 25 years, believing someone would eventually find them and read their story. After the funeral, Kate returned to Whispering Pines. The old campground would never be rebuilt. Instead, the Park Service was turning it into a memorial garden, with 22 trees planted in a circle around the stone fire pit where the students had planned to roast marshmallows on their first night. She walked the familiar trails one more time, but they felt different now. Lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from the forest itself. At the memorial stone, Kate placed a single wildflower and spoke quietly to the wind. "You're home now, all of you." But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. Carved into the bark of a nearby tree, barely visible beneath 25 years of growth, were 2 words, "Thank you." Kate smiled through her tears. Even in the darkest places, hope had survived. 6 months later, Kate received a letter from Margaret Walsh. The elderly woman had passed away peacefully in her sleep, but not before establishing the Emma Walsh Foundation for Missing Children. The organization's mission was simple: ensure that no child disappears without someone continuing to search for them. The letter included a final gift, a photo Kate had never seen before. It showed the camping group on the bus ride to Whispering Pines, all 22 students laughing and excited for their weekend adventure. Emma sat near the front, her face bright with anticipation for experiences she'd never get to have. But in the photo, Kate noticed something she'd missed in all her years of investigating. In the reflection of the bus window, barely visible, was another face, a woman with wire-rimmed glasses watching the bus from a distance. Dr. Monroe had been planning this for longer than anyone realized. Kate filed the photo away, but kept the letter. On particularly difficult days, when the weight of all the missing people cases seemed too heavy to bear, she would read Margaret's final words. "Kate, you gave my daughter the one thing I couldn't give her for 25 years. A voice. Thank you for listening when the rest of the world had stopped hearing. Thank you for remembering when others had forgotten. And thank you for bringing her home." The Whispering Pines case was closed, but Kate's work was far from over, because she knew, deep in her bones, that somewhere out there, other voices were still waiting to be heard, and she would keep listening.